A sterile millionaire bought a poor pregnant woman to have a child, but he turns pale when... Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The manila folder slipped from Maxwell Harrison's trembling, hands scattering papers across the polished mahogany desk. The doctor's words hung in the air like a death sentence. "I'm afraid there's no mistake, Mr. Harrison. You are sterile. There are no medical interventions that would allow you to father a biological child." Maxwell stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, the Seattle skyline blurring through unshed tears. At 35, he'd conquered every challenge life had thrown at him, building Harrison Enterprises from nothing into a billion-dollar tech company, accumulating more wealth than 3 generations could spend, and creating the perfect space for the family he'd always planned to have, the family that now would never exist. "There must be something," Maxwell said, his voice uncharacteristically thin. "Some specialist, some procedure. Money is no object." Dr. Winters shook his head slowly. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Harrison. The damage is extensive and irreversible. Have you considered other options? Adoption, perhaps, or surrogacy?" Maxwell dismissed the doctor with a curt nod, unable to speak further. When the door closed, he loosened his immaculate tie and poured himself 3 fingers of 30-year-old Scotch. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. A man who could buy anything in the world except the one thing he truly wanted, a legacy. A child of his own. 3 weeks later, Maxwell sat in his lawyer's office, listening to Thomas Bradshaw's concerns with practiced patience. "Max, what you're suggesting isn't just ethically questionable. Parts of it might not even be legal," Thomas warned, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses higher on his nose. "You can't just buy a baby." "I'm not buying a baby," Maxwell replied coolly. "I'm providing financial security for a woman in crisis and her unborn child in exchange for legal adoption rights. Everything above board, everything legal." Thomas ran a hand through his graying hair. "The courts might see it differently. This woman, Sarah Miller, she's 7 months pregnant and facing eviction." Maxwell nodded, sliding a folder across the desk. "She has $43,000 in medical debt, works 2 jobs. Father of the baby abandoned her when she told him about the pregnancy. She's perfect." "Perfect?" Thomas echoed, his expression troubled. "Max, we've been friends since college. This isn't like buying a company. This is a human being. 2 human beings. Which is precisely why my offer will save them. Both," Maxwell responded, rising from his chair. "Draw up the papers, make them ironclad." The following afternoon, Maxwell stood in the cramped waiting room of Westlake Community Health Clinic. The peeling paint and outdated magazines were a world away from the private medical suites he frequented. He checked his watch, a Patek, Philippe worth more than most people's cars, and suppressed his impatience. When Sarah Miller finally appeared, Maxwell immediately understood why his private investigator had flagged her. Despite the obvious signs of financial hardship, the worn shoes, the mended jacket stretched over her 7-month pregnant belly, there was a quiet dignity in her posture. Her golden brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup but striking nonetheless with clear blue eyes that held his gaze without flinching. "Mr. Harrison?" she asked, her voice steady despite the slight tremble in her hands. "I'm Sarah." Maxwell nodded, gesturing to the exit. "My car is outside. We can speak privately there." In the back of his Bentley, insulated from the outside world, by tinted windows and fine leather, Maxwell outlined his proposition with the same precision he used in billion-dollar acquisitions. "You would want full custody?" Sarah asked, one protective hand resting on her rounded belly. "No visitation rights for me?" "Full legal custody," Maxwell confirmed. "You would be generously compensated. All medical expenses covered, housing provided, until the birth, and a sum sufficient to restart your life anywhere you choose afterward." He named a figure that made her eyes widen. "Why me?" Sarah asked, studying his face. "With your resources, you could find a surrogate or adopt through proper channels." A flicker of something pain. "Perhaps," crossed Maxwell's face before his composed mask returned. "Surrogacy takes time I don't have. Traditional adoption agencies are reluctant to place with single fathers, especially those with my demanding schedule. Your situation offers an efficient solution to both our problems. Sarah looked down at her hands. My baby isn't a solution, Mr. Harrison. This is a life. A life I can provide for beyond your wildest dreams, Maxwell countered. The best schools, opportunities, security, everything you want for your child but cannot provide. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of impossible choices. Outside the car window, a young family walked by, parents swinging a laughing toddler between them, oblivious to the life-altering negotiation happening just feet away. I need time to think, Sarah finally said. Of course, Maxwell replied smoothly, handing her a business card with his private number. But time is something neither of us has in abundance. 3 days later, in Thomas's office, Sarah Miller signed the papers with a steady hand that belied the turmoil in her eyes. Maxwell watched her, feeling an unexpected pang as she placed her signature on the final page. It's done, Thomas said quietly. Maxwell extended his hand to Sarah, a businessman closing a deal. You've made the right decision, he assured her. Sarah took his hand briefly, her touch cool against his palm. I hope so, Mr. Harrison, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. For all our sakes. As she walked out, Maxwell turned to the window, silently acknowledging the turning point. He had secured his legacy at last. What he didn't yet understand was the true price he would pay for it. Sarah stared at the guest house, a modest accommodation, according to Maxwell, that was larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens and a distant view of Lake Washington. The kitchen is fully stocked, Maxwell explained, his voice businesslike. My housekeeper, Eleanor, will assist with anything you need. Your medical appointments have been transferred to Dr. Abernathy, the best obstetrician in Seattle. Sarah ran her fingers over the marble countertop. And I just stay here until the baby comes? Precisely. Everything in the contract stipulates Remember what I signed? Sarah interrupted, suddenly tired. I'm not likely to forget selling my baby. Maxwell's jaw tightened. You're not selling anything. You're ensuring your child has every advantage in life. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. Eleanor Ward entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that assessed Sarah with quiet curiosity. I've prepared some tea, Eleanor said, setting down a tray. Chamomile, good for the little one. Later that evening, Thomas arrived with additional paperwork. Finding Maxwell alone in his study, he closed the door. Have you thought about what happens if she changes her mind? Thomas asked. Maxwell didn't look up from his laptop. She won't. You can't control everything, Max, not even with money. Watch me, Maxwell replied, finally meeting his friend's concerned gaze. This is happening, Thomas. I suggest you get comfortable with it. After Thomas left, Maxwell found himself wandering toward the guest house. Through the window, he saw Sarah sitting on the sofa, one hand resting on her belly, tears streaming down her face as she spoke softly to her unborn child. For the first time since making his offer, doubt crept in. Maxwell turned away, unseen in the gathering darkness. The following morning, Sarah discovered a delivery of maternity clothes in her size, practical but made of fabrics finer than she'd ever worn. No note accompanied them. At breakfast, Eleanor served Sarah warm scones. He means well, the housekeeper said unexpectedly. Mr. Harrison, he just doesn't always know how to show it. What he knows is how to get what he wants, Sarah replied. Eleanor's expression softened. True, but there's more to him than that. Later that day, Sarah encountered Maxwell in the garden. An awkward silence stretched between them, until Sarah felt a strong kick from the baby. Without thinking, she grabbed Maxwell's hand and placed it on her belly. His eyes widened at the movement beneath his palm. For a brief moment, the businessman disappeared, replaced by a man experiencing wonder. That's remarkable, he whispered. Sarah saw vulnerability flash across his face before his composure returned. He withdrew his hand and straightened his tie. I have meetings, he said abruptly, walking away. But something had shifted between them, a tiny crack in the strictly transactional nature of their arrangement. A reminder that at the center of their contract beat a new heart, oblivious to the complicated terms surrounding its future. Sarah's scheduled appointment with Dr. Abernathy began routinely. Blood, pressure check, measurements, questions about fetal movement. Maxwell waited outside, responding to emails on his phone. When the doctor's expression suddenly changed, Sarah felt her heart race. "The baby's heartbeat is irregular," Dr. Abernathy said, reaching for the phone. "We need to get you to the hospital for monitoring." Within minutes, Maxwell had arranged for immediate admission to Seattle Memorial's private wing. In the waiting room, as Sarah was prepped for tests, Maxwell paced relentlessly. "This wasn't part of our agreement," he muttered, more to himself than to Sarah. "I'm sorry my pregnancy is inconveniencing your schedule," Sarah snapped, fear making her voice sharp. Maxwell stopped pacing, truly seeing her panic for the first time. Wordlessly, he sat beside her and, after a moment's hesitation, took her hand. The unexpected gesture brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "It will be okay," he said, quietly. 4 hours of tests revealed a minor arrhythmia that required monitoring but posed no immediate danger. As they waited for discharge papers, the sterile hospital room became an unexpected confessional. "My mother died when I was born," Sarah admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if history repeats itself." Maxwell's expression shifted. "My mother lived, but might as well have been gone, too busy with charity galas to attend school events. Is that why you work so much, trying to earn attention that never came?" The question hung between them. Maxwell stared at his hands. "I worked because achievement was the only currency that mattered in my family. And now, what matters now?" "Legacy," he answered automatically, but something in his voice suggested uncertainty. Back at the estate, their relationship subtly changed. Maxwell began joining Sarah for dinner, their conversations gradually extending beyond practical matters of the arrangement. One evening, Sarah found Maxwell in the nursery he'd prepared, holding a small stuffed elephant. "It was mine," he explained, embarrassed at being caught in a sentimental moment. "The only toy my father didn't replace with something educational," Sarah smiled. "The baby will love it." "The baby," Maxwell repeated. "We should discuss names." "I thought that was your decision," Sarah said carefully. "I'd appreciate your input." That night, Sarah wrote in her journal, "Today, I glimpsed the man behind the millionaire. I'm not sure which is more dangerous to my resolve." Meanwhile, Maxwell sat in his study, reviewing the contract that now felt strangely inadequate to describe what was developing between them. Not quite friendship, not quite family, but something that defied the clinical terms on paper. The tiny elephant sat on his desk, a reminder of complications he hadn't anticipated when he'd made his proposal. Complications that had nothing to do with legal clauses and everything to do with the human heart. The evening ritual began almost accidentally. Sarah, restless in her 3rd trimester, had taken to walking the expansive gardens at sunset. One evening, Maxwell joined her, and soon their walks became a daily occurrence, a pause in the separate orbits of their lives. "I wanted to be a teacher," Sarah confessed as they circled the koi pond. "Before life got complicated." Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "Why teaching?" "My 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Bennett, was the first person who made me believe I was smart. I wanted to be that person for other kids." Maxwell considered this. "You still could. After—" He stopped, the unspoken reality of their arrangement hanging between them. "After I give you my baby and disappear?" Sarah finished quietly. The conversation might have ended there, but a sudden summer shower sent them hurrying toward the gazebo. Trapped together as rain drummed against the roof, something in their careful dance shifted. "What about you?" Sarah asked. "Did you always want to build tech empires?" Maxwell's laugh held no humor. "I wanted to be an architect. Design spaces that would bring people together, not isolate them like the mansion I grew up in. What happened? My father happened. Harrisons don't build houses, they build fortunes." His imitation carried decades of disappointment. Sarah studied him. "You've built quite a fortress yourself." Before Maxwell could respond, a sleek black Audi pulled into the circular driveway. A woman emerged, tall, elegantly dressed with Maxwell's distinctive gray eyes. "Your girlfriend?" Sarah asked. "Worse. My sister." Victoria Harrison's arrival was like a sudden frost. She swept into the main house, her stiletto heels clicking sharply against marble floors as she assessed Sarah with calculating eyes. "So this is your arrangement," Victoria said over drinks, the word dripping with disdain. "Really, Maxwell, there are more appropriate ways to secure an heir." "Victoria," Maxwell warned, "have you considered what people will say, the board members? This isn't like your usual impulsive decisions. This affects the Harrison name." "I don't answer to the board about my personal life," Maxwell replied. Coldly, Victoria turned to Sarah. "And you, dear, what do you get besides a paycheck for your services?" Sarah stood, one hand protectively on her belly. "I'm not feeling well. Please excuse me." Later, Maxwell found Sarah in the guest house packing a small bag. "Running away?" he asked from the doorway. "This was a mistake," Sarah whispered. "I'm not part of your world. Victoria doesn't dictate my decisions, but she's right. I'm just a transaction to your family, and maybe that's all I should be." Maxwell crossed the room, surprising them both by taking her hands. "You're not just a transaction to me, not anymore." The raw honesty in his voice made Sarah look up. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that boundaries were blurring in ways neither had anticipated. "Stay," Maxwell said softly. "Please." It wasn't a command from an employer or a reminder of contractual obligations. It was a request from one person to another, and against her better judgment, Sarah nodded. That night, for the first time since their arrangement began, they shared dinner at the same table as equals, Victoria's disapproving presence forgotten, as they cautiously built a bridge across the divide between their worlds. "It's a business function. My presence is expected," Maxwell explained, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. "Having you there simplifies explanations about why I have a pregnant woman living on my property." Sarah smoothed the fabric of the maternity evening gown Eleanor had helped her select. Midnight blue silk that somehow made her feel both elegant and more conspicuous than ever. "So I'm a prop for your corporate image?" she asked, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. Maxwell turned, something like regret crossing his features. "That came out wrong. I'd like your company, Sarah, if you're willing." The gallery was housed in a converted warehouse, its industrial bones softened by strategic lighting and the vibrant artwork adorning its walls. As Maxwell guided Sarah through, the crowd with a protective hand at the small of her back, she felt the curious glances and whispered speculations. "Maxwell Harrison, finally domesticated," came a silky voice. A statuesque blonde in a crimson dress approached, her smile not reaching her eyes. "With such interesting timing, Camilla." Maxwell nodded coolly. "This is Sarah Miller." Camilla Wellington's gaze swept dismissively over Sarah's pregnant figure. "How quaint. Found yourself a ready-made family? One might question the authenticity of such an arrangement." Sarah felt Maxwell tense beside her, but before he could respond, she stepped forward. "I find that people who question others' authenticity often struggle most with their own," Sarah said pleasantly. "Lovely dress, by the way. Valentino from 3 seasons ago, isn't it?" Camilla's perfectly composed expression faltered. She retreated, with a mumbled excuse about greeting other guests. "That was." Maxwell seemed at a loss for words. "Eleanor may have briefed me on the guest list," Sarah admitted, "including your former girlfriend who dumped you for a Swiss banker." The corner of Maxwell's mouth twitched. "I'm beginning to think I underestimated you, Ms. Miller." As they moved through the gallery, Sarah noticed how differently Maxwell behaved when he thought no one was watching. The genuine interest he showed in emerging artists' work, the generous tips he left with service staff, the way he listened intently when she shared her thoughts on a particularly moving sculpture. Later that evening, returning to the estate, Sarah took a wrong turn looking for the kitchen and found herself in a room she hadn't seen before. Soft lighting illuminated what was clearly a nursery in progress. Walls painted a gentle green, a handcrafted wooden crib, and bookshelves already filled with children's classics. "I wasn't ready for you to see this," Maxwell said quietly. From the doorway, Sarah ran her fingers over the spines of the books. "When did you do all this?" "I've been working on it at night. I wanted it to be perfect." The tenderness in his voice made Sarah turn. Maxwell Harrison, billionaire, ruthless businessman, the man who had essentially purchased her baby, stood uncertainly in the doorway, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions, until Maxwell's phone shattered the silence. His expression changed as he listened to the caller. "When?" he demanded. "I'll be right there." "What's wrong?" Sarah asked. "My father's had a heart attack," Maxwell said, already moving toward the door. "He's in intensive care." The carefully constructed world they'd been building shifted once again, reminding them both that some complications couldn't be anticipated in any contract. The hospital corridor seemed to stretch endlessly before them. Despite Sarah's insistence that she could wait at home, Maxwell had asked her to come, a request that surprised them both. Outside the ICU, Victoria paced like a caged panther. She froze when she saw Sarah. "You brought her? Now? Have you no sense of propriety?" "Not now, Victoria," Maxwell warned, his voice tight with strain. Robert Harrison lay diminished among machines and tubes, his once commanding presence reduced to beeping monitors and labored breathing. Maxwell stood rigid at the bedside, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Harrison," the doctor said gently, "your father is stabilized, but his heart has sustained significant damage. We should discuss care options." As Maxwell followed the doctor outside, Victoria turned to Sarah. "You don't belong here. This is family business." "I'm only here because Maxwell asked me to come," Sarah replied quietly. Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Don't delude yourself into thinking you're anything more than a transaction to my brother. Once he has what he wants, you'll be discarded like everything else that no longer serves his purpose." In the hallway, Sarah found Maxwell staring out a window. His reflection haunted. "He was asking for my mother," Maxwell said without turning. "She's been dead for 15 years, and he still calls for her. Not his children." Sarah stood beside him. "Tell me about him." Robert Harrison built an empire through sheer force of will and ruthlessness. Nothing was ever enough. Not his success, not his children's achievements. Maxwell's voice hardened. "The great irony is how desperately I've tried to earn the approval of a man I never even liked." "Is that why this baby is so important to you? A chance to do better?" Maxwell turned, his expression raw with honesty. "I want to be nothing like him, and yet here I am, treating family like a business acquisition." Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered to find her mother's voice, unheard for years. "Sarah, I've been trying to find you. I'm clean now, 6 months sober. I want to make amends." The parallel was almost too perfect, both of them confronting family ghosts on the same night. Later, in the hospital cafeteria over untouched coffee, Sarah shared fragments of her own story. A mother lost to addiction, foster homes, the determination to build something better than what she'd known. "We're more alike than you might think," she said finally. "Both trying to outrun our pasts." Maxwell reached across the table, tentatively covering her hand with his. "Maybe some pasts can't be outrun, only faced." The moment hung between them. Not employer and surrogate, not millionaire and struggling single mother, but two people recognizing themselves in each other's broken pieces. As dawn broke over the Seattle skyline, they left the hospital changed. The walls they'd built to protect themselves had begun to crumble, revealing the possibility that what had begun as a cold business transaction might become something neither had dared to imagine, a chance at healing old wounds through unexpected connection. Robert Harrison would recover enough to return home, Sarah's mother would continue calling, but something fundamental had shifted between Maxwell and Sarah, a recognition that the family they were creating might save them both in ways they hadn't anticipated when signing their carefully worded contract. Sarah found Thomas waiting for her when she returned from her prenatal appointment. His careful smile didn't reach his eyes. "Maxwell isn't home," she said, setting down her purse. "I know. That's why I'm here." Thomas hesitated. "There are things you should know, Sarah. Things Maxwell hasn't told you." He slid a folder across the kitchen counter. Inside were court documents, a class action lawsuit against Harrison Enterprises for privacy violations that could cost billions. "He could lose everything," Thomas explained. "The timing of your arrangement, it wasn't coincidental." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly. "What are you saying?" "If Maxwell establishes himself as a devoted single father, it creates sympathy with the jury. Public perception is everything in cases like this." The ground seemed to shift beneath Sarah's feet. "So I'm a public relations strategy?" Thomas's expression softened. "I don't know what's in Maxwell's heart, but I do know he didn't tell you everything when he made his offer." After Thomas left, Sarah sat in the garden, trying to reconcile this revelation with the man who had held her hand in the hospital, who had built a nursery with such care. That evening, Eleanor found her still there. "Bad news, dear?" "Just questioning my judgment," Sarah admitted. Eleanor sat beside her. "I've worked for Mr. Harrison for 12 years. He's complicated but not cruel." "Whatever Thomas told you, you knew?" Sarah interrupted. "I know that people are rarely simple, and motives are rarely pure," Eleanor replied, "including yours." Before Sarah could respond, Maxwell's car pulled into the driveway. As he approached, Sarah noticed his distracted expression. "Problem at work?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "Nothing important," Maxwell replied, clearly lying. The revelation from Thomas wasn't the only secret unraveling. The following day, Maxwell received a report from his private investigator. Sarah had met 3 times with a man named Jake Wilson, the baby's biological father. When confronted, Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. "You're having me followed. You're carrying my child. I have concerns about who you associate with." "Your child?" Sarah's laugh was hollow. "Funny how biology matters when it's convenient for you." "What does Jake want?" Sarah looked away. "He says he's changed, wants to be involved." "And you believe him?" Maxwell's voice hardened. "Or is this a negotiating tactic? Did you two plan this all along?" The accusation hung between them like poison. Sarah rose, face pale with fury. "Is that what you think of me? That I'm running some kind of scam with my ex?" "I don't know what to think," Maxwell replied coldly, "except that you've been meeting the man who abandoned you and keeping it from me." "Like you kept the lawsuit from me?" Sarah countered. "Thomas told me everything, Maxwell. How convenient that you needed a sympathetic family image right when your company is facing ruin." The silence that followed was deafening. 2 people, who had begun to trust each other, now stood on opposite sides of a chasm of suspicion, each wounded by the other's secretive behavior. "I think we need to remember what this arrangement really is," Maxwell finally said, his voice distant. "A contract, nothing more." Sarah felt something break inside her. "Perfectly clear, Mr. Harrison." As she walked away, Maxwell called after her. "Stay away from Jake Wilson." "I mean it, Sarah." She didn't turn around, didn't let him see the tears streaming down her face. The fragile connection they'd been building lay shattered between them, casualties of hidden agendas and unspoken truths. 6 weeks until the due date. The calendar on Sarah's wall seemed to mock her with its red-circled date, a countdown to heartbreak disguised as a medical milestone. The estate had grown cold with silence. Maxwell worked longer hours, coming home well after Sarah had retreated to the guest house. Their once comfortable evening walks had ceased, replaced by formal status updates about the pregnancy delivered through Eleanor. "He asks about you," Eleanor confided one morning while bringing Sarah breakfast, "even if he won't admit it." "He made his position clear," Sarah replied, stirring her tea without drinking it. "We're just honoring a contract." The divide might have continued indefinitely if not for the cramping that woke Sarah at 3 a.m. Not labor too early, but intense enough to make her cry out. Eleanor found her doubled over in pain and immediately called Maxwell. He arrived in her room still wearing his suit from the previous day, hair disheveled, eyes wild with concern. The ambulance is on its way. What happened? It started an hour ago, Sarah gasped. It's too soon. In the emergency room, their recent conflict evaporated in the face of potential crisis. Maxwell refused to leave Sarah's side, his hand gripping hers as doctors ran tests and monitored the baby's heartbeat. Braxton Hicks contractions, exacerbated by stress and dehydration, the doctor finally announced. But there's another concern. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. The diagnosis was preeclampsia, a potentially life-threatening pregnancy complication requiring immediate bed rest and constant monitoring. We should admit you, the doctor continued, but with the proper home care setup. Money is no object, Maxwell interrupted. Whatever she needs. Back at the estate, a medical team transformed the guest house into a mini hospital ward. Maxwell supervised every detail personally, canceling meetings despite the looming lawsuit crisis. Your board meeting, Sarah reminded him weakly from her bed. The settlement discussion. You can't miss it. Maxwell's expression was unreadable. The company will survive. You might lose everything. Some things matter more, he said simply. That evening, Sarah overheard Maxwell on the phone with his lawyers, his voice tight with tension. I don't care what it costs. Pull funds from my personal accounts if necessary. No, I won't be at the mediation. Find another solution. Later, he appeared in her doorway with a tray. Eleanor's night off, he explained awkwardly. I made soup. Well, heated it. The gesture. Maxwell Harrison, billionaire CEO, bringing her soup, broke something open between them. Why are you doing this? Sarah asked. The lawsuit could bankrupt you, but you're here instead of fighting it. Maxwell set down the tray. The company is just money and buildings. This, he gestured to her belly. This is a life. 2 lives. I thought it was just a contract, Sarah whispered. Maxwell's eyes met hers. I was wrong. The admission hung between them, not quite an apology, but a beginning. As Sarah drifted to sleep that night, she felt Maxwell gently placing a hand on her belly, whispering words too soft to hear. Outside her window, Jake Wilson watched the intimate scene, his expression hardening with calculation. The text he sent afterward was simple. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. She's more valuable to him than we thought. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains as Sarah awoke to find Maxwell asleep in the armchair beside her bed, his laptop still open on his knees. For a moment, she studied his face. The worry lines softened in sleep, vulnerability replacing his usual mask of control. The moment shattered when her phone buzzed with Jake's name on the screen. Sarah silenced it quickly, but not before Maxwell stirred. Him again? Maxwell asked, voice rough with sleep. Instead of deflecting, Sarah decided truth was the only path forward. I need to end it, whatever game he's playing. Maxwell sat forward. Sarah, what's really going on with Jake? He showed up the day after the gallery opening, said he'd changed, wanted to be part of the baby's life. Sarah's hands trembled. But yesterday he mentioned knowing about your financial situation. He wanted information about the lawsuit. Maxwell's expression darkened. He's using you to get to me. I think so, Sarah admitted. But I need to be certain. I need to face him once and for all. Absolutely not, Maxwell began. But Sarah cut him off. This isn't your decision. I got myself into this mess by trusting the wrong person. I need to fix it. After heated debate, they compromised. Sarah would meet Jake at a cafe near the estate, with Maxwell's security team watching discreetly. Jake arrived with practiced charm, but his eyes calculated every move. You look good, Sarah. Living the high life agrees with you. What do you really want, Jake? Sarah asked directly. His smile faltered. To be a father to my child, after abandoning us both. Sarah shook her head. Try again. Jake leaned forward. Fine. Harrison is worth billions. Paternity rights are worth at least a few million. We could share it, start over together. The ugly truth hung between them. You want to extort Maxwell using our baby. It's business, Jake shrugged. The rich guy loses some pocket change. We get set for life. Everyone wins. Sarah stood. Except the baby, who'd have a manipulative extortionist for a father. We're done, Jake, for good. Back at the estate, Sarah found Maxwell in his study, surrounded by legal documents. How bad is it? She asked. Maxwell looked up, his expression grave. Bad enough. The plaintiffs rejected our settlement offer. If we lose in court, Harrison Enterprises will be finished. And the lawsuit? Was I really part of your PR strategy? The cool, blunt question hung in the air. Maxwell set down his pen. Initially, yes. Thomas suggested that a family narrative would help with public perception. He met her gaze directly. But that's not why I asked you to stay, Sarah. That's not why I'm here now instead of in that boardroom. Then why? Because somewhere between contract and crisis, you became important to me. You, not just the baby. Maxwell's voice roughened. With emotion. I don't know what that means yet. I just know it's true. The admission stunned them both into silence. For a man who controlled every variable in his life, this unplanned emotion was perhaps the greatest risk of all. Sarah crossed the room and took his hand. I think we need a new agreement. One that acknowledges we're both different people than when we signed those papers. Outside the study window, Victoria watched the intimate scene with narrowed eyes, phone pressed to her ear. It's worse than we thought, she said quietly. He's actually fallen for her. Implement the contingency plan immediately. In the sunroom overlooking the garden, Sarah and Maxwell sat across from each other. A fresh contract between them, not typed by lawyers, but handwritten on simple stationery. Shared custody, Maxwell read aloud. You'd stay in Seattle? Sarah nodded. In my own place with my own career. But the baby would have both of us. And the financial arrangement? A trust for the baby's future, not a payment to me, Sarah clarified. I don't want your money, Maxwell. I want our child to have a chance. At a normal life with two parents who care. Maxwell studied her face. You've given this a lot of thought. I've had nothing but time. Sarah smiled, gesturing to her doctor-mandated bed rest. And one thing becomes very clear when you might lose everything, what actually matters. As Maxwell signed the revised agreement, his phone rang with Thomas's number. The plaintiffs have requested an emergency hearing, Thomas reported. They're alleging new evidence of intentional privacy violations. Maxwell, this is bad. After the call, Sarah found Maxwell staring at financial projections. These numbers, she observed, they don't make sense. What do you mean? Maxwell asked, surprised. With unexpected business acumen, Sarah pointed out discrepancies in the quarterly reports. Someone's been manipulating the data. Look, these security protocol implementations are dated after the alleged violations. That's your defense. Maxwell stared at her in amazement. How did you see this? I was an accounting major before life intervened, Sarah explained. Numbers tell stories if you know how to read them. For the next week, as Sarah's condition stabilized, a new routine emerged. Mornings found them reviewing case documents together. Afternoons were spent preparing the nursery. Thomas brought legal updates while Eleanor enforced rest periods with grandmotherly authority. You two, Eleanor observed one evening, finding them asleep on the sofa surrounded by baby name books. Quite the unexpected partnership. During this fragile peace, they created traditions that felt like family, debating names, reading aloud to the baby, planning a future neither had imagined possible months before. Emma, Sarah suggested one evening. It means whole or universal, something that brings everything together. Maxwell tested the name. Emma Harrison, it fits. You still want her to have your last name? Our last name, Maxwell corrected gently. If that's what you want. The question hung between them, not just about a name, but about what they might become to each other. One rain-soaked evening, Maxwell found Sarah in the nursery, arranging stuffed animals in the crib. I never thought I could have this, he admitted, leaning against the doorframe. A real family, Sarah turned to him. Is that what we are? Maxwell crossed the room and, with uncharacteristic hesitation, brushed a strand of hair from her face. I'd like us to be. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility, until Sarah winced suddenly, pressing a hand to her side. The Guiu. Baby's kicking, she explained, guiding his hand to feel the movement. She knows her father's voice. The word, father, landed with emotional weight. As they stood together, connected by the life they'd created between them, the world outside their bubble continued its inevitable march toward crisis. In his office downtown, Jake Wilson signed papers pushed across the desk by Victoria Harrison. You understand what you're agreeing to? She asked coldly. Jake nodded. I know exactly what I'm doing and when. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Maxwell adjusted his tie in the mirror, the evidence Sarah had discovered secured. In his briefcase. You'll win this, Sarah assured him from the doorway of his room. The data manipulation is clear once you know where to look. Maxwell turned to her with a rare, unguarded smile. You're the reason we have a fighting chance. Call me the moment it's over. First thing, he promised, kissing her forehead before leaving. Sarah watched his car disappear down the driveway, one hand resting protectively on her belly. At 38 weeks, even the smallest movements exhausted her. But today she felt strangely restless. The first contraction hit while she was arranging baby clothes in the nursery. Sarah dismissed it as Braxton Hicks, but when the second came, just 7 minutes later she realized her labor had begun 3 weeks early. Eleanor, she called, making her way carefully downstairs. I need to reach Maxwell. But Maxwell's phone went straight to voicemail. Courthouse rules required. Devices be silenced. With contractions intensifying, Eleanor drove Sarah to the hospital, while the security team attempted to reach Maxwell. In the courtroom, Maxwell was presenting the evidence of data manipulation when Thomas slipped him a note. Sarah in labor. St. Luke's Hospital. Your Honor, Maxwell interrupted himself. I must request an immediate recess. Family emergency. The judge frowned. Mr. Harrison, we've convened specially for this hearing. My child is being born, Maxwell said simply. Already gathering his papers, the judge's expression softened. 2-hour recess granted, but we reconvene without fail at 1 o'clock. Maxwell raced through hospital corridors, only to be stopped at the maternity ward entrance by a security guard. Family only during complications, sir. Complications? Maxwell felt his heart drop. I'm the father. Not according to the patient's records, the guard replied. The biological father is already with her. Through the window, Maxwell saw Jake Wilson standing beside Sarah's bed, holding her hand as medical staff swarmed around her. A nurse was attaching monitors, expressions urgent. There's been a mistake, Maxwell insisted, pushing forward. Sir, I have strict instructions. From who? From me, came Victoria's voice behind him. Brother, we need to talk. In a private waiting area, Victoria's composure was steel. I'm saving you from yourself, Maxwell. This woman and her ex-boyfriend have been planning to take you for millions. That's a lie, Maxwell growled. Is it? Jake Wilson filed paternity papers this morning with evidence proving they've been in contact throughout her time with you. The timing is suspicious, wouldn't you say? You did this, Maxwell realized. You approached Jake. Victoria's smile was thin. I protected our family interests, as always. Inside the delivery room, Sarah fought through contractions while trying to understand Jake's sudden appearance. Get out, she gasped. Where's Maxwell? Security's keeping him away, Jake replied smugly. Our lawyer filed emergency custody paperwork this morning. Very convincing evidence that you've been my partner all along, just working a con on Harrison. You forged evidence, Sarah realized, horrified. The baby's vitals, the doctor's voice cut through sharply. Fetal distress. We need to prep for emergency C-section. Outside, Maxwell confronted the head of hospital security, Thomas at his side presenting legal documentation. Sarah Miller signed a shared custody agreement with me. Her medical proxy, Maxwell! Eleanor pushed through the crowd. The baby's in danger. Emergency surgery. The word surgery cut through the bureaucratic standoff. As Sarah was wheeled toward the operating room, she locked eyes with Maxwell across the corridor. I didn't betray you, she called out. I wouldn't. The doors swung closed behind her, leaving Maxwell facing the most important legal battle of his life. Not for his company, but for his family. The minutes stretched into hours as Maxwell paced the surgical waiting area. Thomas worked furiously on his laptop, filing emergency motions to counter Jake's claims, while Eleanor kept a quiet vigil beside them. Mr. Harrison? The surgeon appeared, still in scrubs. Mother and baby are stable. It was close. The umbilical cord was wrapped around the baby's neck, causing the distress. But we got to her in time. Her? Maxwell's voice caught. A little girl, 5 pounds, 4 ounces. And Sarah? Recovering from the anesthesia. She's asking for you. Before Maxwell could move, a hospital administrator approached with a police officer. I'm sorry, but we have conflicting legal claims regarding the infant. Until this is resolved. The mother has named Mr. Harrison as her permitted visitor, the surgeon interrupted firmly. Medical decisions supersede your administrative concerns. This way, Mr. Harrison. In the recovery room, Sarah lay pale against white sheets, an IV in her arm. Her eyes found Maxwell's immediately. They took her to the NICU, she whispered. She wasn't breathing at first. Maxwell took her hand, his usual composure shattered. I should have been here. Victoria? Working with Jake, they filed false paternity claims, forged evidence of an ongoing relationship between you two. His grip tightened. Sarah, I never doubted you, not for a second. Tears slipped down her cheeks. They won't let me see the baby. Jake is claiming rights as the biological father. Thomas is handling it. Right now, you need to rest. Maxwell brushed her hair back gently. I'll find a way to see our daughter. In the neonatal intensive care unit, a standoff was underway. Jake Wilson stood outside the glass window, a security guard preventing his entry. On seeing Maxwell, Jake's expression hardened. You can't buy your way out of biology, Harrison. Watch me, Maxwell replied coldly, nodding to Thomas, who handed the charge nurse a document. Emergency court order granting Mr. Harrison temporary guardianship pending paternity determination, Thomas explained. Signed by Judge Michaels 20 minutes ago. Inside the NICU, Maxwell stood over the incubator, where tiny Emma lay connected to monitors. Her small chest rose and fell with each breath, 5 perfect fingers curled against the blanket. Hello, Emma, he whispered, carefully placing his finger in her tiny hand. She reflexively gripped it, and something in Maxwell's carefully constructed world shifted permanently. For 3 days, Maxwell barely left the hospital. He shuttled between Sarah's room and the NICU, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, his court. Case forgotten. When Emma's breathing tube was removed and she was strong enough to be held, the nurse placed her in Maxwell's arms. Support her head, the nurse instructed. That's right. Looking down at Emma's face, Maxwell made a silent promise. Whatever it took, whatever he had to sacrifice, she would never doubt she was loved. When Sarah was finally allowed to visit the NICU, Maxwell watched as mother and daughter met properly for the first time. Sarah's tears fell as she counted fingers and toes, whispering words of love against Emma's downy head. She has your eyes, Sarah told Maxwell softly. That's impossible, he replied with a gentle smile. Not the color, the determination. Look at her fighting. On the 5th day, as Emma grew stronger and legal battles raged outside, Maxwell brought Sarah a small velvet box. What's this? She asked. My mother's locket. I want Emma to have it someday, he explained. And I want you to know, whatever happens with the courts, with Jake, with my company, you and Emma are my family now. The only thing that matters. Outside the hospital room, Victoria watched the intimate scene, her calculated plan unraveling before her eyes. The betrayal she had orchestrated had not driven them apart, but bound them closer than ever. Emma's monitors beeped steadily as she slept in her hospital bassinet, unaware of the storm surrounding her tiny existence. Outside the room, Maxwell faced the board members who had assembled for an emergency meeting in the hospital conference room. "The court reconvened without you," Raymond Porter, the CFO, explained grimly. "We're facing a summary judgment of $4 billion. The company cannot survive it," Thomas added. "Your sister presented evidence that you directed the privacy breaches personally. Emails, memos, recordings, all fabricated but convincing." Maxwell's expression remained unchanged. "Victoria always was thorough. There's an offer on the table," Porter continued. "Victoria will withdraw the evidence if you step down as CEO and grant her controlling interest in the company." "And Emma?" Maxwell asked, his focus unwavering. "Jake Wilson has agreed to drop his paternity claims in exchange for $10 million and a position within Harrison Enterprises." Maxwell's laugh held no humor. "So that's the price of family these days." Back in Sarah's hospital room, Jake made one final attempt at manipulation. "Be reasonable, Sarah," he urged. "Take the money. Harrison's going down anyway, Victoria's made sure of that. You and I could give Emma a fresh start." Sarah's eyes were cold. "You endangered our daughter's life with your schemes, Jake. There is no amount of money that would make me trust you. You've changed," Jake observed. "The Sarah I knew would have taken the practical option." "The Sarah you knew was desperate and alone," she replied. "I'm neither anymore." As Jake left, Sarah noticed a small recorder under her water cup. She pressed play and heard Jake's voice clearly admitting to the evidence fabrication with Victoria. Sarah sent a text to Thomas. "I have what you need." That evening, Thomas presented Maxwell with 2 envelopes. "Your options, as requested." The first contained papers to surrender control of Harrison Enterprises to Victoria, along with Jake's paternity settlement. The second held documents transferring Maxwell's personal assets, separate from the company, into irrevocable trusts for Emma and Sarah, along with resignation papers from Harrison Enterprises. "You'd walk away from everything you've built?" Thomas asked incredulously. "Not everything," Maxwell replied, looking toward Emma's room. When Sarah was discharged, the following day, Maxwell waited with unexpected news. "I'm not fighting Victoria for the company," he told her. "Let her have it." Sarah stared in disbelief. "But we have evidence of their conspiracy now. The recording, using it means a prolonged legal battle. More time in courtrooms than with Emma." Maxwell took her hand. "My father spent his life building an empire and missed everything that mattered. I won't make the same mistake." "What will you do?" "Start over. Properly." His eyes held steady on hers. "But I need to know where you stand, Sarah. Not just for Emma's sake, but for us." Before she could answer, Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Touching scene," she remarked coldly. "I have the papers ready for your signature, Maxwell." "Actually," Sarah interrupted, "we have a counter-proposal." She nodded to Thomas, who handed Victoria a folder. "What is this?" Victoria demanded. "Evidence of your conspiracy with Jake Wilson, including recorded confessions of evidence tampering," Thomas explained. "Felony charges, potentially." Victoria's composure cracked. "You wouldn't dare. I'm family." "That's exactly why I'm giving you a choice," Maxwell replied. "Option 1. You resign from the board, sell your shares back to the company at market value, and disappear to the villa in France. Option 2. Criminal charges, public scandal, and watching the Harrison name dragged through every tabloid in the country." After Victoria's stunned departure, Sarah turned to Maxwell. "You didn't tell me you were planning this." "I wasn't," he admitted. "But someone very wise recently showed me there's always another option if you're willing to rewrite the rules." As they prepared to take Emma home, Sarah made her own decision about their future, one that would require Maxwell to trust her completely. Rain streamed down the windows of Maxwell's study as he signed the final documents. With each signature, pieces of the empire he'd built slipped away, not lost to Victoria's schemes but deliberately released. "Are you certain about this?" Thomas asked, witnessing the pages. "We could still fight." "I've been fighting my whole life, Thomas," Maxwell replied, setting down his pen. For approval, for success, for control. I'm choosing something different now. Upstairs in the nursery, Sarah sat in the rocking chair with Emma sleeping against her chest. Eleanor bustled about, arranging baby clothes with grandmother-like precision. He's giving it all up, Sarah said softly. His company, his position, everything he's worked for. Eleanor's hands stilled. Not everything, dear. Not what matters most. When Maxwell entered the nursery, his expression was lighter than Sarah had ever seen it. He knelt beside the rocking chair, gently touching Emma's small back. It's done, he said simply. Harrison Enterprises is restructuring. I've retained a minority stake, but operational control passes to the board tomorrow. And Victoria? Accepted. The settlement. She leaves for France tonight. Maxwell met her eyes. We're free, Sarah, all three of us. Later that evening, as Maxwell packed his personal items from the home office, Sarah found him holding his father's old pocket watch. The weight of legacy hung heavy in his hands. My father would consider this the ultimate failure, Maxwell mused. Surrendering the company he built. What do you consider it? Sarah asked. Maxwell closed the watch with a decisive snap. The first true success of my life. He placed the watch in a box of keepsakes for Emma, not as a symbol of what was lost, but what was chosen instead. As they prepared to leave the mansion that had been the site of their unlikely beginning, Sarah finally shared her decision. I want us to start fresh, she began carefully. Not in your world or mine, but something we build together. Maxwell listened as she outlined her vision. A modest home, a small investment firm founded on ethical principles, college courses. She wanted to pursue a life measured not in billions, but in moments. It won't be easy, she cautioned. You've never lived without wealth, without power. I've never lived with purpose either, Maxwell replied. Or with love. The word hung between them, not part of their original contract, not expected or demanded, but grown nonetheless in the space between transaction and truth. Outside, moving trucks waited to transport their essential belongings to a lakeside cottage Maxwell had purchased under a different name. Protection against lingering media attention. As rain continued to fall, they stood one last time in the grand foyer where Sarah had first entered as a business arrangement. Are you sure? Maxwell asked, giving her one final chance to reconsider. This life will be very different. Sarah looked down at Emma sleeping peacefully in her carrier, then back to Maxwell. Different doesn't mean less, Maxwell. Sometimes it means more. As they stepped outside together, Maxwell left behind more than a mansion and a corporate empire. He left behind the legacy of Robert Harrison. Wealth built on ruthlessness, success measured in acquisitions, relationships viewed as transactions. In its place, he carried something his father never possessed, the understanding that true wealth couldn't be purchased, only earned through sacrifice and choice. And as he helped Sarah into the waiting car, cradling Emma's carrier with careful hands, Maxwell Harrison finally felt truly rich. 1 year later, morning sunlight danced across the modest kitchen as Maxwell expertly balanced Emma on his hip while flipping pancakes with his free hand. At 12 months old, Emma Harrison was a bundle of curious energy with her mother's golden brown hair and a determined spirit that was uniquely her own. Da, da, da. She babbled, reaching for the spatula. Not yet, sweetheart, Maxwell laughed. Maybe when you're two. Sarah entered the kitchen, textbooks tucked under her arm, pausing to press a kiss to Emma's forehead and then, with deeper meaning, to Maxwell's lips. Professor Williams extended my research grant, she announced. Full funding for next semester. That's wonderful, Maxwell replied, genuine pride in his voice. We should celebrate. The lakeside cottage they now called home bore little resemblance to the mansion they'd left behind. Comfortable rather than luxurious, filled with photographs instead of priceless art, it was a home built for living rather than impressing. Maxwell's new investment firm occupied a small office downtown, focusing on ethical startups and community development projects. The returns were modest compared to his former wealth, but the satisfaction ran deeper. The financial pages no longer carried his name. Victoria occasionally appeared in society columns from Paris or Monaco. Harrison Enterprises continued under new leadership, the scandal forgotten as newer corporate dramas captured public attention. Later that afternoon, as they prepared for Emma's first birthday celebration, a package arrived from France. A silver rattle with the Harrison crest. No note enclosed, Maxwell placed it silently in a drawer. Recognition of the olive branch, but unwillingness to introduce old ghosts into their hard-won peace. The small gathering included Eleanor, who had retired from the mansion but remained part of their lives, and Thomas, whose legal practice now focused on family advocacy. No corporate associates, no society friends, only people who had seen them at their most vulnerable and chosen to remain. As Emma toddled between guests in her birthday dress, Maxwell found Sarah standing at the edge of the lake. Having second thoughts? He asked, joining her. Sarah shook her head. Just the opposite. I was thinking about that first day in your office, the contract we signed. How neither of us could have imagined this. Maxwell took her hand, the simple gold band on her finger catching the light. A quiet ceremony 6 months earlier, witnessed only by their closest friends. I was trying to buy a legacy, he mused. Instead, I found something I didn't know how to look for. And what was that? Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. A family, a real one. Maxwell's voice grew serious. Sarah, do you ever regret it? Giving up the financial security I originally offered? Sarah turned to face him fully. Not for a second. Money doesn't raise a child, Maxwell. Love does. From the patio, Eleanor called that it was time for cake. Emma sat in her high chair, eyes wide with wonder at the single candle flickering before her. As they gathered around singing Happy Birthday, Maxwell felt the weight of his father's pocket watch in his pocket. No longer a burden of expectation, but a reminder of the choice to be different. Later, he would place it in Emma's keepsake box with a letter explaining not the empire that might have been hers, but the courage it had taken to choose a different path. When the candle was blown out, with considerable help from her parents, Emma reached for both Maxwell and Sarah, one small hand gripping each of their fingers. In that perfect moment, Maxwell Harrison, once defined by acquisition and control, understood the immeasurable wealth of letting go. The contract that had brought them together had expired long ago, replaced by something no lawyer could draft and no fortune could purchase. A family built not on obligation, but on choice. Not on transaction, but on transformation. And as Emma's laughter filled their modest home, Maxwell knew with absolute certainty that he had finally found the legacy that mattered.